Hi everyone, it's Plesky P here from Melbourne, Australia. Gives me great pleasure to talk to a rock and roll legend today, Charlie Gracie. How are you today, Charlie?
How are you, Mr. Plastic?
Doing really well. Charlie, are you feeling groovy?
Yes, I'm feeling very groovy.
That's it.
Hey bananas, we think you're groovy. Hey bananas, we watch a movie. Yeah. Drive your tune buggies everywhere, just going crazy without a care. Hey bananas, we think you're groovy.
Yeah, Charlie, we think you're groovy. It's okay.
You're
Now,
back again. You're back again.
I'm back again because you're important. We can't play the theme song forever. Now, I just want to ask you,
Yeah.
when did your career start? Tell me about how your career started.
Well, it started when I was 10 years old. My dad and I took a walk down to a place called South Street, which later became famous as a song. Where do all the hippies meet? South Street, South Street. Remember that?
Yeah.
By my friends, the Orlons. Anyway, it was a mill area. Haberdashers, shoe shops, clothing shops, pawn shops. And he saved up $15. This was 1946, right after the war. He was going to buy himself a new suit. Instead of buying the suit, he bought me a guitar, and that's how I got in show business.
Do you remember what guitar it was?
Yeah, it was a harmony guitar, 15 bucks. Hey, listen, bend in the middle. It was a tough way to start, but it wasn't even my idea. It was my dad's idea for me to become a musician.
Fantastic. And when did you record your first song?
Well, I recorded my first song late 51, early 52. I was just about to enter high school, and I recorded from that period until late 56, until I finally recorded my number one hit, Butterfly, which came out in 1957. Was over $1 million seller.
Isn't it amazing that you recorded, obviously, before everybody, even Bill Haley? Would you have recorded before Bill Haley?
Well, no, Bill Haley recorded before me, but he was localized. Nobody knew who he was. He was known as the Saddleman at that time. Bill Haley, the Saddleman. They wore cowboy suits. As a matter of fact, my parents took me to see them at a place called Sleepy Hollow Ranch in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, when I was just a boy. And when I heard them play, they sort of stimulate my love for the music, and then went on. It's a long story, of course, but everybody's got to start somewhere, and that's how I started.
But I mean, to do recording before Elvis Presley, before Jerry Lee Lewis, before everybody had Son, that's amazing.
Even before Moses.
Now, I've got to ask you, of all these celebrities that started recording after you, who did you actually become friends with?
Well, my closest pal of all the guys we traveled with was Eddie Cochran, God rest his soul. Great kid, talented boy, handsome, had everything going for him, and he was a wonderful person. He was at my home in Philadelphia, where Italian-American people, my mother used to make him the red sauce. We called it gravy, and he used to love to come to my house and eat. Him and Jerry Capehart, his manager, and all the kids, of course, would come out screaming for him because I used to play baseball with them. They weren't too happy to see me, but when they saw him, it was a whole different story. And we became pals. Unfortunately, he had a very short life, and I often think of him because it breaks your heart when somebody like that has to die that young and has so much to offer. It's terrible. But time marches on, and I'm here, and he's not. I don't know why, but there's a reason for everything. We'll find out in the end.
But I'm just saying, even 20 Flight Rock influenced the Beatles as well.
Right. Well, we were the pioneers of the music. As a matter of fact, they made fun of us here in America when we started playing rock and roll. You know the story. They said it was a bad influence on young people, and it had a lot of sex connotations. We didn't know anything about sex at that point in our lives. We're just happy to be singing and playing and making a couple of bucks, or as you say, a couple of quid.
I got to say, you must have known a lot of big names, and with this new book that you actually got now, I've got to show people the book for a second.
Okay.
What a book to have! This one here, Rock and Roll's Hidden Giants.
Yeah. The
story of rock pioneer Charlie Gracie. Yes. What a book! And to have, let me tell you, to have the foreword written by Paul McCartney.
Well,
I mean, that's massive. So Paul McCartney.
My goodness, you can't beat that with a stick, can you?
Can't beat that, Charlie. It says enough.
He's a great guy, by the way. A great talent and a great guy. And a very humble man, considering the amount of money he's worth, really. And he's worth every penny of it, too.
Can I ask you, did you actually meet the Beatles?
Well, I met him. He's the only Beatle I met. But many years ago in a magazine article, a Billboard magazine, George Harrison mentioned my name. And I'm going to quote what he said. He thought my guitar playing was brilliant. Coming from him, that's quite a statement. But we never met face to face. And then, unfortunately, he died. And that's the only quote I have of him. You see what happens when, in 1957, after I had my big hit, there came a demand for me over in Britain. My records hit the top 10 there. I had more hits in Britain than I had in America. So consequently, I went on tour. Bill Haley preceded me with his band, but I went as a solo artist, just me on stage with the guitar. They still had, variety was still in vogue at the time. Now, in my audiences, I performed 2 shows a day, 7 days a week, with a pit band, by the way, which is tough to play rock and roll. But we managed it. It turned out all right. And in the audiences, unbeknownst to me at the time, 3, 4, 5 years younger than me, were the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Joe Cocker, Van Morrison, as on and on, on and on. And finally, as the years went by, I got a chance to meet some of these guys and even toured with Van Morrison. And they told me, Charlie, you were a great influence in our careers. I never thought I was influencing anybody at the time. I was just happy to. My father was making $75 a week, right? I was making $1,000 a night. So just imagine that tickle I was. I didn't care where I sang or played in the men's room, the ladies' room. Made no difference to me. I was making big money. But of course, the taxes and the agents, they took most of it. But listen, the opportunity to become somebody, born and raised in a ghetto where I was as a kid. We were poor people. My father was a working man. You know, he raised 3 children on a $50 a week salary. It wasn't easy in those days. But everybody was in that same tax bracket. So I got an opportunity to make a few bucks, get us out of the ghetto, went to my lovely home, and the rest is story. I mean, I go on and on. I've had a career almost 70 years now. It's a long time.
Charlie, I just find it amazing that you made it so big in the UK and you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the UK. To me, that's amazing because you've got to understand, the Beatles are big in America, but you're big in the UK. To me, that says enough to me.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. See, when I first went to Britain in the 57, 58, those 2 years, I took the country by storm because I really played the guitar. You know, Bill Haley strummed the guitar, and a lot of guys strummed the guitar, but I was a guitarist. I was ready for stardom at the time because I started young as a kid. So when I went on stage and started playing and singing, well, they were amazed. I never saw anything like it before. So consequently, that made me more popular with the fellow musicians, you see. And then as years went by, I worked with Eddie Cochran and people like Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and the Everly Brothers. We were all kids together, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. And we were just happy to be singing and playing and having fun and getting paid for it. You see, it's a whole long procedure that I've been through in my life, but I can remember almost every moment of it. It's in the book, by the way.
They've got to buy the book. Everyone's got to get that book. It sounds fantastic.
Okay.
Now, moving on with the other artists that you influenced and you knew, here in America, I'm just saying, you appeared on American Bandstand?
Yes. I was on the original show, was hosted by another chap, not Dick Clark, but a guy named Bob Horn. And he had the show locally for many years and finally got some kind of a jackpot, you know. And he lost the show, and Dick Clark was in a little studio nearby, and finally it fell right into that slot. And then within a few months, it went coast to coast and was the biggest thing in music.
Unbelievable. But as I said, coming from Philadelphia, and at that time, you've got to understand, there's always these new artists coming along.
Of course.
But at least you had the start, and you were lucky enough to deal with big artists. That's, you know, that's a pioneer there, as I said.
Well, I worked with them all, and even made a film with Jerry Lee called Jamboree. When he sang a song in it, and that's when I first met Jerry, young, handsome guy with the blonde hair, you know. And that was many, many years ago. I mean, my God, when I look back, I can't believe how many years went by. When I get on stage and still perform, I still feel like I'm 20 years old. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's totally amazing. Man. And as I said, you had a unique guitar style. How do you describe your guitar style?
Well, I have my own style. Of course, I studied from a teacher for many years, and by the time my stardom, if you want to call it that, came, I was prepared for it because I was a full-fledged musician by the time I was 15, 16 years old. I could play with anybody. As a matter of fact, I made my first recordings in New York with some of the great jazz men, and I was scared to death because I was just a kid. But the guy, Charlie, you're doing great. Just keep from doing what you're doing. You sound just as good as we do. And it built my confidence. And I performed for many years. I still play the guitar. And you got to remember, when I took my first show over to Britain, there were no guys that sang or played the guitar outside of Bill Haley, and he wasn't really a guitarist. He just sang and he held his instrument in his hand, like Elvis, for instance, you know. So when they saw me play, they were flabbergasted. They said, "But this guy can really play as a musician," and that influenced a lot of the guys to become guitar players and so on and so forth. I don't want to take all the credit for it, but I'll take maybe one teeny little percentage point.
No, you deserve it, Charlie. Can I also ask you, did you meet a lot of British female singers in the UK when you went there?
Yes, I was on a show called the 6-5 Special, which was very famous at the time. And one of the host girls was Petula Clark. She was a up-and-coming star. And then, of course, she became internationally famous later. And also was a young lady by the name of Darcy Squires. You know that name?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, she was a big star in England. So what happened was when I got booked to perform at the Hippodrome Theatre in London, they made her, she took second position on the bill, and she didn't like it because she was always a superstar in her country. So he made a big fuss about it, and she quit the bill. And that even gave me a bit more publicity and made me more famous. So she was a very famous singer. And you know, I met many of them over the years. I just did a tour with, what's his name? Marty Wilde. You know, heard of Marty Wilde?
Yeah, Marty Wilde is big. And Marty Wilde,
Yeah.
he's got the daughter, Kim Wilde.
Yes, yes. Well, we just did a 24-city tour last year, and we had a wonderful time together. All the shows were packed, a lot of fun.
Yeah, Marty Wilde is a big artist. And also I want to ask you about Cliff Richard.
Yeah.
If you met Cliff Richard or you're friends with Cliff Richard?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. When I was on tour in England, my wife and I, a few years back, I was talking to one of the DJs there, and he said to me, "Have you ever met Cliff Richard?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, Cliff's a big fan of yours, Charlie." I said, "Oh, gee," I said, "That's wonderful." He said, "Would you like to meet him?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to meet him." So we had a show in London that evening, and they invited me to the show. We had watch him perform. Great performer, by the way. And after the show, we went backstage and we met. Hey, we hugged. Hey, Charlie. Hey, Cliff. He says, "Charlie, I got all your records in my jukebox." That's funny, right? Guy's a superstar in Britain. Nobody was bigger than Cliff Richard. And we became friendly over the years. We talked. I had a radio show. My son and I had him on the show. We talked by phone. I mean, we don't pal together, you know what I'm saying? But it's nice to make friends with a guy like that. Very multi-talented person.
But isn't it amazing how many people you influenced and you probably don't even know who you really influenced? That's the amazing thing. You are before your time, Charlie.
Well, listen, first of all, let me say I've had a wonderful career. I had my 15 minutes of fame. And of course, it sustained me all these years in the business, and I'm still performing, and I still love to perform. I mean, I live to get on stage and sing and play. That's been my whole life since I've been a kid. And I don't know how to do anything else because thanks to my parents, I had that opportunity. I never had what they call a day gig. You know what I'm saying? This is what I've done all my life, and it sustained me up until this point. Now I'm 84 years old. I never lie about my age, only my height. I'm 6'2". I'm really a small guy. I'm 5'4.5". But the guitar was always as big as me, still is, and it's been a great asset to me. You know, I've been so fortunate in my life. I have a wonderful marriage. My Joan and I will be married 63 years in February. I have 2 wonderful children. I mean, I've had a great life. What can I tell you? It's been a great run. Great run.
I got to say congratulations, Charlie. Just listening to the stories are great. But tell me now, in 1964, when the Beatles became big, and you probably knew about them earlier, probably in 63.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Beatles?
Well, I always thought they were great. I mean, they had some great hits and some great songs, and they're all multi-talented fellas too. You know, my goodness, it's a shame there's only 2 left. But, you know, destiny is a funny thing. The day you're born, and this is my belief, the day you're born, your day or die is already picked out. It's what you're doing between the counts.
I actually agree with you, Charlie. That's true. I do. And as I said, to write a fantastic book, and here's the book again because I want to mention it.
Yeah.
I want everyone to go out and buy the book, Rock and Roll's Hidden Giant, the story of rock pioneer Charlie Gracie.
Yes.
The man is a rock and roll legend. And you know what you've told us today, Charlie?
Yeah.
It's blown me away. Tell everyone where they can get the book.
It's available on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, any one of those places.
You know, the best thing, read the story. The foreword's by Paul McCartney.
Well,
And I just want to say sincerely from myself here in Australia, this will go out to the world. Everyone's going to know about your book. And Charlie Gracie, you are a living legend. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
thanks for having me on, and give my love to everybody down under, would you please?
Thank you so much. Thanks, Charlie.
CharlieGracie.com. You can find out all about me.
Thanks, Charlie. We love
Thank you. Ta-da.
Bye.